Fox. President Trump tweeting just minutes ago, the United States has been losing for many years, $600 to $800 billion a year on trade. With China, we lose $500 billion. Sorry, we're not going to be doing that anymore. Take a quick look at the futures. Continue to be down close to 500 points, 471.472. NASDAQ down 161. S&P down 50. I guess, Becky, if I were to pose a question to Warren, it would just be that those trade deficit numbers, we get bogged down in talking about whether they're good or bad or how to fix them. And it's a symptom of really it's a symptom more than a cause of what happens with China. I was just wondering, Warren, you've done great over the years with the status quo, with how the United States has approached China and China trade. Berkshire's done great. We've all done great. Everything's fine. Do you wish that Trump hadn't confronted China at all, and we just aren't addressing any of these long-term problems with intellectual property or, take your pick of which issue we're trying to solve, but you just wish he had left it alone and just let Berkshire do its business the way it's been doing, or do you think there's some rationale to confronting China?
China and the United States, for the next 100 years, I can tell you two facts about it. They'll be the two superpowers of the world, right, and we'll always have some tensions with them. And it can well be about intellectual property. It certainly has over the last 20 years or thereabouts, 30 years. And it will be about trade. It will be about policies that they're carrying out, in terms of their neighbors or we're doing. There's no way you can have two countries so dominant in the world without them having conflicts. You just don't, there are going to be tensions, there are going to be negotiations, and sometimes we'll both come away thinking we lost, but it's inevitable. So and how you play the game if you're negotiating with some people that are tough negotiators on the other side, it's not, those are not easy decisions to make. If you're doing with a labor union, nobody really wants to strike. It's bad for both sides, but sometimes things develop to that point. So I think you should get very used to the fact that if you're a young person, that you're going to see a lot of different tensions over time, and it will depend on the individuals involved. It will depend on the specifics of the situation. But every time we sit down, it won't be like a garden party.
Warren, you mentioned that there are going to be times where both sides walk away and feel like they lose. Are there times that both sides could walk away and feel like they win? Because that's usually the sign of a successful negotiation. You want both sides to feel like they won at the end. And the idea of a negotiation is to take something that you have, the other person needs, and in a sense trade that for something that they have that you need, and it's going to be constant, and there's times when it's going to be tense. It's just the nature of things. You have that on a much different level when you're negotiating nuclear arms reductions or something of the sort. We know it's in the interest to get the nuclear stockpiles down and all of that, but that doesn't mean it's easy. And you try to come up with deals that are good for both sides, but that's not always easy. I try and think about that in this scenario, and it may be particularly difficult in this scenario because for a long time we've been dealing with China as if they were still not a superpower, as if they were still. So we've been giving them better sides of deals. It's really hard to all of a sudden say we're taking some of that back. What do they get out of this deal when we are trying to change a negotiation that we think has been unfair to this point?
Well, it's difficult for us to accept the fact. It was difficult for us to accept the fact after World War II that the Soviet was a superpower in terms of military power, and there were, as you know, obviously, there are all kinds of tensions involved in that and negotiations, and it's still a worry that we have the two big nuclear stockpiles in the world, and you worry in terms of mistakes being made. It's a big game, and with China, it's overwhelmingly an economic game, and it's an economic game we didn't think we'd be in 40 or 50 years ago. The Chinese the rise of their economy has been extraordinary. And they do some things we don't like in connection with that. And sometimes you have to get tough to make changes, and we do some things they don't like. But it's a reality now, and it's going to be a bigger reality as the years go by. And it's very easy for it to become a huge political issue. I mean, so you'll have people fanning the flames for their own interest in politics or their own interest in business, and it's not easy to navigate. But leadership that's the job of leadership, is to take on the tough problems.
Having said that, the economy has held up very well.
Sure.
In the face of any tensions that we've seen to this point. Jobs report, incredibly strong on Friday. The last GDP report was very strong, too. So
yeah. You can't stop America. You can't stop China, though, either. But you can't stop America. I mean, we live as a country. You know, it's extraordinary what we have compared to 30 or 40 years ago. Even in agriculture, it makes it tough in agriculture because we get more productive all the time, and that tends to depress prices. But this country is going to move forward. I mean, there's no question about that. But China's going to move forward. And the way to try to do it is to do it that maximizes what both countries can do well, and more trade is better. But trade in specific industries can hurt specific industries here, and that's a huge problem. The heads of both countries have to be the educators in chief, and they have to explain why trade is good for the populace as a whole, and it can be terrible for people in certain industries. And then a rich country takes care of those people that become roadkill in the process of producing a better life for 330 million Americans.
Lots of people on Wall Street are not going to be as sanguine about this news today. I've been reading some reports last night. Goldman Sachs saying that this is not only rapidly increases the odds that we don't get a trade pact with China, but also increases the odds that you could see Trump announce that he's going to pull out of NAFTA, or that he's going to put auto tariffs on European imports. What do you think of that, and what would that mean? It's
the problem of escalation in anything. We have the problem of that with nuclear weapons. I mean, the escalation, and it gets more and more dangerous as people become feeling more and more threatened, and their own local political situation demands more and more action. I mean, that's the dynamic that you are facing anytime you get to these major problems between countries, and that requires the wisdom of the leaders, but to some extent it requires the wisdom of the people. I mean, and how the leaders convey it to people, and how they conduct themselves. But we will have this sort of thing happen. We've had it happen, obviously, and occasionally would turn into wars in the past. We can't do that anymore. In a nuclear world, you can't get to that point, and any sane person realizes it, but you don't want to get too close to that tinderbox.
USMCA, also better known as New NAFTA, that deal is out there, but now I think Pelosi is saying that they're not going to bring it for a vote at this point. Are you in favor of the New NAFTA deal?
Well, I was in favor of the original one. We are very, very lucky to have Canada and Mexico bordering us. I mean, and then oceans on the other side. I mean, it's geographically, it's a very attractive position compared to how countries are situated around the world, and we've got lots and lots and lots of common interests, and we are the big guy in the game, and as the big guy in the game, we should do more than our share of making sure that our neighbors are growing and prospering at a rate that's consistent with ours. Doesn't mean they're equal, but when we live better, they live better. And trade with Mexico and Canada is enormously important. And we should treat them as neighbors and not adversaries.